Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the latest edition of the World Report. I'm Scott Crowfoot. On today's report, the World Bank chief economist warns the Fed not to raise interest rates amid a struggling U.S. economy. Ayatollah Khamenei says Israel won't exist in 25 years as the West continues to cave to the Islamic Republic. A new report says 20% of illegals caught at the border have criminal records. Shh, don't tell Representative Luis Gutierrez. Hillary resets again, going to Hollywood to show off her heart and humor. John Boehner looks to Democrats to help hang on to his speakership. And our moment in history discusses the U.S. leader who heavily influenced the birth of the Islamic Republic in Iran. But now to our top stories. Earlier this year, ISIS threatened to flood Europe with 500,000 migrants as part of a psychological attack, fulfilling Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's 2011 warning of a sea of chaos and jihadists would conquer Rome. Now the floodgates are open in Europe as the manufactured migrant crisis expands the Islamic Caliphate. An ISIS operative called it a complete success, infiltrating around 4,000 fighters as a result of Western generosity. However, 72% of the refugees are men and 47% are not even Syrian. Joining us with his sage insight is the World Report senior advisor and economics blogger for USA Today Online, Maury Beschloss, who can be followed on Twitter at @mbeschloss. Maury, is this not national suicide for all these Western nations, especially Europe right now?
It's absolutely unbelievable that this is happening. It's not only national suicide, it's done almost with a will to commit this act against themselves.
And we've just seen wave after wave after wave come into this country through our own border. The world seems to learn nothing from the past and history.
No, it's worse than that because there is knowledge of what these people are willing to do. It could be a large number of ISIS people in there.
It is.
They're yelling Allahu Akbar, which means supposedly God is praised, but that is the basic theme song of the ISIS murderers. And these people are they must think Europe is ready to take the gas pipe, and they're going to facilitate it.
And just like the pictures that we're showing on the screen right now, there are ISIS-infiltrated jihadists that are shown with their weapons now being brought into Europe. And it's funny because they all want to get to Germany. But you notice none of them are going to Saudi Arabia or Turkey or Israel or the UAE or any of these other countries.
Well, first of all, they even contacted Netanyahu and he said, we're too small a country. We'll make a contribution at the local charity, but we're not going to have any of you people coming into our country.
I wonder if that would be the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You could buy off your way out of that by just paying them. Well, anyways, this is a serious situation.
It is a serious situation, and you make a point. Why aren't the Arab countries? Because they're not ready to commit suicide.
And these guys don't want to go to Arab countries. They want to infiltrate the European Western civilized society.
First of all, Saudi Arabia does not have a death instinct. They know that they're in real trouble. They got Iran, which is now in alliance with Russia, and being armed to the teeth by Russia, both defensively and offensively.
So and they're right on their southern border now.
The Houthi rebels are being supported by Iran. So Saudi Arabia has never felt its mortality challenged than it has now. As a matter of fact, when King Salman came in to talk to Obama to try to get some hope that this was not as bad as it seemed, he walked out of there and Obama's speechwriter or his basic representative said, this guy Early, his press chief, said King Salman was very satisfied with the explanation that Obama gave him. That's like you guys saying, we're going to have you guys taken care of and killed, but we'll do it gently and nicely.
Okay, now here's the million-dollar question. You know we're going to open our doors. You know we're going to end up taking these people in. How many people can we afford to take in now? And I'm not talking just financially, but from a cultural standpoint, from a language standpoint. I mean, we're being overrun by a lot of different entities right now. How much can we stand?
Well, I think this is dependent on how the election is going to come out next year. I think, first of all, I'm fed up with the Republican Party. I got to tell you something. What a bunch of cowards they are. They had a chance of doing something big when the Tea Party arose spontaneously. 500,000 went to Washington on their own money to do something, and they were shunned by the leadership of the Republican Party.
I'm glad you mentioned leadership, because that is where the problem is.
Oh, of course.
If you look at the bottom base, there's a lot of good guys that are coming up.
They have no other choice but to be Republicans. But then that was 4 years ago. 2 years ago, actually, no, it was last year, in 2014, we took the Senate and the House. And what has happened? They are still being pushed around by this non-entity in the White House who knows all the little games to play, and he's being supported by enough people to make it seem that they still have all the cards to play at the game.
Okay, back to my initial question. How many of these migrants do you think we can handle? Should we take any of them in?
No, we should not take any of them. We have a good excuse. First of all, they'd have to go coming across the ocean. They can't swim it. Secondly, we feel right now we've been very, very amenable to immigrants or refugees or people from the South, whether it's Mexico or Guatemala or Salvador or any of the Central American countries. That we've been very good to them. And we've now made love to Cuba. And all these things, it'll take time to absorb. There's a good excuse for saying we're just not in the position to do anything. We'll give to charity.
Isn't it interesting that 72% of these so-called migrants are men, and half of them are not even Syrian, which is what we're being led to believe is where this big crisis.
Well, they're not only men, they're mature men ready to take up arms and be a rebellious element within our body politic.
And earlier this year, January and February, ISIS did threaten to overrun Europe with 500,000 migrants, and that's exactly what they're doing. This has been pretty much foretold, and still the West acts as if we just didn't see this coming.
Not only that, though, they must think this is easier than we thought. We thought we were going to have to find some very surreptitious way to get around. But here we're being invited in.
Right.
And I think Europe is finished. I wouldn't give you 5 cents today for a continent that at one time ruled 80% of the world.
And we talk and we bash the president and this leadership a lot, and justifiably so.
Yeah.
What about David Cameron? I think he's even a bigger weasel than what we have right now. And we have no leadership in the West. I used to look up to Angela Merkel, and now I'm not even sure where she's coming from. What's your take on what's going on with Cameron and Merkel?
Well, Cameron is a weakling. The Conservative Party used to be the paragon of the Conservative Party with Winston Churchill. I mean, a man who stopped the Nazis from winning the war in 1941.
Who was censored by his own.
Oh yeah, he was. When he ran for re-election right at the end of the war, the Labour Party won because the people wanted freebies at the end of the war. Churchill, you've done your job. Now we're going to take over and get the socialists in power. I think what has happened is that there's been a total lack of any energy left in Europe. There's no more energy. There's no more looking at the future. I think they see themselves as a shadow of the past. And I go back to that book that was written about 100 years ago, The Decline of the West. The German book, Oswald Spengler wrote it. And he predicted that when in 100 years, the West, which would be basically white Western Christian Europe, would no longer be the major power that it had become in the wake of the Middle Ages and certainly in 1800 and the early 1900s.
The average life of a democracy is less than 200 years because of the way that it's set up to where the people just start taking from within and it collapses on itself. So the fact that we've been around this long is pretty amazing.
unfortunate part of a democracy. Jefferson said a democracy will only be successful if we have an educated electorate.
Yeah.
Exactly. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. I think it didn't work in Egypt. Thank God for Egypt. Egypt, that Assisi, Abdel Assisi, I mean, who was trained in the United States as a military man. I still can't believe how he pulled that stunt off, because
Absolutely.
he was a low-level officer, and he was brought into the cabinet of Morsi, who was head of the Islamic Brotherhood, not realizing that he was bringing an enemy right into his midst.
Yeah, and if we left it up to Clinton and Obama, the Muslim Brotherhood would still be running the show.
Oh, absolutely. What do you mean? They were praising it and saying, "We'll give you anything you want to keep you in power."
This has got to be difficult, but I have to bring this up. German newspapers are putting out welcome pieces printed in Arabic. Being that that's your background, this cannot sit well with you, I would not think.
No kidding.
What's your thoughts on Germany and their about face here?
Well, Germany is now trying to...
Is this guilt? Is this
a certain
World
amount
War II Nazi guilt?
Yeah, there's a certain amount of that, but that's overplayed. I think just like Otto Kohl, when he started the European Union and gave up the mark, that'll tell you everything. Germany has given up whatever power it had. Obviously, the 12 years of the Nazis were so horrible that it'll stigmatize Germany forever.
Kind of what's happened to us going back a couple hundred years in our past. That stigma is still over the heads of the American people.
But not the way that the Nazis, and 90% of the German people in 1940, after they conquered France and England, are Nazis. Pro-Nazis. Were happy to get all the goodies that came out of conquering those countries. So most of them were to blame because they looked the other way. Now, you had maybe 10% who were vicious killer Nazis, but the rest of them went along. They didn't know what was going on.
Well, if you wanted light and fluffy, this wasn't the show. We need to step away for a brief moment. We'll return with our economic and energy update, global outlook, political insider, and much, much more. We get lots of questions from viewers all over the world, so just email your question or video to maury@theworldreport.org. You just might see yours featured right here. Remember to like us, recommend us, and leave